All right, everyone, here's a story that I have a little bit of mixed feelings about, which is Roy Moore in Alabama apparently musing about the idea of trying to return to the Senate there. You remember he lost. And Trump and his son are both saying, no, that's not a good idea. Please don't do that, Roy. You'll remember that he was the one that was targeted by a smear campaign that was centrally organized by Democrat-aligned groups that literally attempted to defame him and say like he was a pervert and weird shit like that. Now, I would say this. Roy Moore is kind of a cringy dude, and I understand that based on polling, he could potentially win a Senate seat there. The thing is, I'm not sure. The reason why Trump would try to warn him off is because of optics. Because even if Roy Moore isn't actually, like they were trying to say he was a pedophile and stuff like that, there's no evidence of any of that. The claims were solidly manufactured by a shill organization, like a literal paid-for shill operation being run in part in coordination with Democratic campaigns, with the DNC. So it was literally a political conspiracy at a fairly low level. The problem is that a lot of people accept that truth. Now remember, truth and perceived reality are not always the same thing. Which is more important? What is actually true or what is perceived? It depends on whether it's a human system, like politics, like this is, or if it's something more objective. It doesn't matter if you're trying to calculate things for architecture, your perceived reality of the number that you need, the number of bricks in a wall or something, fuck your perceived reality. You need the absolute number, the absolute truth, something concrete and objective. Politics isn't concrete and objective, it's very abstract. Strategy is concrete, and that's what the Trumps are looking at. They're looking at the reality of the situation is this. Most people there on the left will harangue about Roy Moore. They will fight many times harder because they've been primed to believe that he's like a hashtag #MeToo rapist, essentially. That he creeps on young girls and weird shit like that. They think he's a pervert. Well, that's going to set him off, and it'd be bad for the Republican Party on every other ticket if Roy Moore is a visible face, because then they'll say, well, the GOP is still the party of old white perverts and hates women and stuff like that. Trump doesn't want to have to deal with that bullshit, so they're very kindly asking Roy Moore not to get in. I would encourage him to listen to them. Again, I realize he got shafted. I realize Roy Moore, and here's the other thing. And the thing is this, when I'm discussing GOP politicians, in particular from the Deep South, often, I disagree with many of his positions. I think he's strongly anti-abortion. I'm more pro-choice. Not sure about his views on like gay rights and stuff like that. And he's more of the moralistic, religious side of the conservative movement, as opposed to maybe a Rand Paul, more libertarian in nature, a Trump populist, somebody more into money and business and finance and things. The Roy Moore Republicans are the ones I have the most problem with. I realize, though, he did get shafted. He got screwed by a coordinated smear campaign. And in that, he is blameless. Some of the weird shit from his past may have been kind of sort of true, but there's no proof that he's ever done anything unconscionable. There is proof, though, absolute objective proof, that people made up phony shit about him and put it out as though it was true in order to crush his candidacy. And it worked because of the lynch mob it generated. We've gotten to the point now where as long as you wait until the 11th hour, later on in a campaign, all you have to do is manufacture a fake bombshell and drop it in the person's lap right before the election happens, and by the time that the facts are actually sorted out, a lynch mob has prevented them from getting into office, making it, by the way, harder for them to then defend themselves afterward. They don't have that political protection. Roy Moore is a victim of this. Yes, Roy Moore, the victim, a very funny thing to say because of the allegations against him, again, most of which were politically manufactured. But that doesn't mean that he wouldn't drag the whole Republican Party down. He could destroy Trump's 2020 bid. If a Democratic candidate successfully tied Roy Moore in with Trump, it'd be a problem. So even if just for his own plausible deniability, Trump says, no, you shouldn't do this, and takes a hands-off approach and throws Roy Moore under the bus, I can understand it strategically speaking. A lot of people, they approach politics from the position of an idealist. They have certain ideals, certain principles they won't waver on, even if those principles conflict with observable reality, like pragmatic, strategic, on-the-ground actual reality. And so it makes it more difficult for them to analyze things, to make predictions, because their bias seeps in. Makes it more difficult for them to potentially mount a political campaign, because they're more willing to fall on their own sword than to do X, Y, or Z, and so it can become a little bit of a problem. This is more of a problem with right-wing movements than left-wing movements. The left-wing movements have been injected with so much subversive ideology at this point that they no longer care about things like principles. Like, they can literally say one thing, say another thing that directly contradicts it in the same paragraph. Like Bernie Sanders when he talks about his tax plan. Well, it's going to be good for the poor, but we're going to have to drag all the tax brackets up, something that he only alludes to because he's not brave enough to outright say it. Oh yeah, by the way, you out there who have 30, 40,000 a year in income, yeah, you'll be paying double digits more too, but I'm not going to tell you to your face. I'll give you free shitty health care. And so you see how it works on the left. There's no principles and no sound ideology behind it. Whereas with some of these conservatives, like a Roy Moore conservative, they're based on evangelical sentiment, ultimately. Hyper-religious, moralistic, authoritarian, actually. And so there's a little bit more of a solid foundation there, which actually can hamper them. Which might not be a bad thing insofar as evangelocons go, but it can hold the Trump populists back as well at times, even the libertarians. So yeah, I would say the Trumps are right on this one, with the caveat that Roy Moore himself, he was shafted. He was mistreated by a coordinated shilling campaign that fucked up his potential career. Although he didn't help himself, like when he goes to the voting place and he rides in on his horse and weird shit like that, it's like he was a cringy kind of dude. So it's like, what do you expect the Trumps to do? You're totally different kinds of Republicans. Trump is the kind of Republican that was basically a Democrat before the 90s and rides around New York City in a limo. He doesn't go town to town on his horse, selling medicine, some crazy shit like that. He's pro-gun, but he's not a gun toter, in other words. He's a different breed of Republican and doesn't get along too well with the Roy Moore types. Although, funnily enough, the evangelical voting base is like one of the most strongly pro-Trump groups. It's actually interesting, the demographics that are Trump support. I can understand why, though, he and his son would say no to backing a Roy Moore candidacy. Like, please don't run. And even if they in secret say, okay, well, we'll give you money and shit, we hope you win, but, we can't do this publicly for up-ballot reasons, that would make sense. That's about all. Peace out.